A rebellious one sort of pulls those things down. A rebellious one also is not afraid to stand up for what is right. I have made a lot of people angry and upset through my take on things. And those who come listen to my podcast, I would imagine everybody is going to be offended at some point or another.
Well, welcome to the True Man Podcast. Now, what does it mean to be a rebel? No. I didn't say rebel. I said revel. You know, when today's guest first told me about this idea, I thought, well, that makes perfectly good sense. Why didn't I think of that? That was one of those why didn't I think of that moments. And I'm not going to define it. I'm going to leave it up to today's guest. So I want you to welcome to the podcast, Dave Brown. Now, Dave and I met through an organization called Zoe, who you can find at zoe.org. And I encourage you to go out there. Zoe helps create resources and environments to help foster community spaces for men and women. And I have to say their retreat weekends are phenomenal. And I know Dave agrees with me wholeheartedly on that. But by profession, Dave is an ecological engineer, which is really interesting and fascinating, by the way. And I've really gotten to know him as a writer, a life and business coach, and a personal trainer. Dave has started his own podcast, The Revellious, and folks, it is absolutely amazing. And great storyteller. And I'd be remiss in saying, and it's one of the reasons why Dave is here today, he is the fiercest prayer warrior I've ever met. And it's such a pleasure to have him on the podcast. Dave, it's so wonderful to have you here. How's everything going?
Oh man, doing well. Glad to be here. It's just good to see you, Mike. I love being able to connect with you, and had a wonderful morning just being outside and experiencing the temperature start to drop.
Yeah.
We were breaking records yesterday. It was the hottest we'd had in like close to 40 years. And so I think we're venturing back into fall again today, and I welcome it actually.
Yeah, so it's we're recording this. It's fall, and we're at that time of year where one day it's 80 and the next day it's 40. That's just the way it is. It's fall. Yeah. It's such a incredibly lovely time of year, to say the least. So it's interesting, Dave. You reached out to me several months ago and you said, "Oh, I'm thinking about starting a podcast," and we talked about you doing that. And now you got this thing out there, and you're just doing an amazing job with it.
Thank
Dave,
you.
and I want to talk about that a little bit because, as I was preparing for this interview, I wanted us to talk about prayer because, like I said in the opening here, your prayer is amazing. It's so hopeful and it's just so alive and real. But as I was preparing for this podcast, I was listening to your podcast, and all your episodes are great, but one in particular just absolutely stopped me cold, and I got caught up in every word like I've never gotten caught up in a podcast before. And so while I want to talk about prayer, I want to talk about this podcast you did, podcast number 18, where you're talking about your wife, Brenda. And I've got to assume to a large degree, as we talk about prayer, that Brenda's death has helped you transform your prayer life and your intimacy with Christ somehow. So I'm not sure where you want to dive into that, but maybe you want to touch on that episode and how it shaped you and your life at this stage.
Yeah. Oh man. I will tell you that doing that episode was very freeing for me.
Oh,
And
I
wanted it to be that way. I view that episode as sort of like not just the ending of a chapter, but it was like the epilogue to a book. And so that book is now on the shelf, and I can pull it out as I need to, but it's a book that's been open for a very long time. Brenda and I met 33 years ago. We married 32 years ago, and she died 22 and a half years ago. So, I mean, these are things that are really a long time ago, but they've been so much in the forefront of my life, and so very formative in who I am as a person. And my life with her was sweet in many ways and very devastating in others. And we were married 10 years, 7 months, and 8 days when she died. And for those of you who don't know it, Brenda died at her own hand. And so suicide is such a difficult thing to navigate. And there is such a stigma around it. And I experienced it a lot for a year or so after Brenda died. And yeah, just the whole thing was very heartbreaking. And early on in our marital life, it drove me to my knees like nothing else.
Mm.
And I discovered that Jesus really, really does want to hear how you're feeling. And he wants to be intimately yoked together in the difficulties that you're going through. Life is intensely difficult. And
Yeah.
and Jesus, he demonstrated himself to be the rock of my salvation. And I share this in the podcast, where next to meeting Jesus personally, discovering that he is at the rock bottom of life is my single greatest personal discovery. You know,
Yeah.
we often view God as high and lifted up, and he is. But he's also at the bottom of life. You know, people talk about hitting bottom.
Yeah.
I've hit bottom, and I'll tell you something, it's rock solid because Jesus is there. He is the rock bottom of life, and no one can descend below him. And discovering that created this intimacy with him that I don't think he and I may have achieved it through something else. I know how God is, and you know, he has his plan A, his plan B, his plan C, you know, because he is the master at being able to honor one's free will, but also bring about what he ultimately desires.
Dave, talk about that a little bit. I think this is important. It was one of my big takeaways to listening to this episode was when you were talking about rock bottom. And why I think this is important is a lot of people do go to rock bottom and then they just sit there.
Yeah.
How can they hear God's voice when they are at rock bottom or find that hope that he's there? How would you encourage that?
Yeah, what a really good question. There's something that I started doing where when I'm feeling so horrible, maybe it was following a suicide attempt by Brenda, or a time where she just was struggling immensely, and I didn't know where to go, but I would go to God and I would pour my heart out to him. And what I started doing, Mike, is I would share what I was feeling, and then I would immediately speak forth whatever entered my mind. And 99.9% of the time, that was Jesus speaking right back to me. And so I would be like weeping before God, and then I would hear Jesus say, "Oh, Dave, I understand completely. I know exactly what you're feeling. I've never not been there with you, and I will never not be there with you. I will always be with you." You know, just hearing those kind of things, and then, you know, and then I'm back to just bawling my eyes out. But I found that practice of voicing out loud what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling, and even pleading with God. And sometimes I was complaining, sometimes I was angry. And, you know, it's like there were times, man, where Jesus, I actually want to purchase, I hope this is okay to say, Jesus, I want to purchase firearms, and I want to go out and take out Brenda's adopted family. I want to take him out. I felt homicidal even.
Yeah.
And Jesus to lovingly hear that and say, I know exactly what you feel.
Oh,
I know exactly what you mean. I'm going to be with you. We're going to work through this. You're not going to need to do that. And to hear him start to even pray through me, oh God, I pray for Brenda's adoptive father, that he would experience you, that he would somehow hear you speaking into his soul, and that he would feel loved by you. To be brought to that kind of thing is incredibly life-changing.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like it, when you are completely raw and open before God, and he knows exactly how to touch you, how to listen, how to look at you, smile, weep with you, and say the things that you're longing to hear. So that's my advice.
Wow.
Just being open and speaking forth what you feel God saying to you in response, because God still speaks. I am in existence right now because God still speaks. When it says that God spoke everything into existence, that word is continually being spoken. Everything that's in existence is in existence because God is currently speaking it into existence right now. So he is always speaking. I just want to hear.
How
When you're brought to a place of deep suffering, somehow the ears get open. And mine were, and they've never closed. And I'm really grateful, bud.
Yeah, that's just wow. I'm just virtually speechless. That's just incredible. It's real. It's authentic. I think that's what people and families go through in these moments of suicide, where somebody takes their life. And basically, it just leaves us with a lot of questions.
Of course.
And and wonderment. In your case, this didn't come as a complete surprise to you. I almost gathered that you were prepared, as I listened to the podcast, that you were in some mode of preparation for the day when it would actually occur.
I was. I lived with multiple futures before me. And I am I'm a prepper type person. And I grew up in Boy Scouts, where be prepared was our
Yeah.
slogan, and so that's deeply rooted inside of me, that I when I know the snow's coming, I've got everything in my truck. And when it hits, I want to go out and get myself ready to be able to be out and about. And then I'll actually take exploration routes out just to make sure that I know I can get out and about should something arise where I absolutely need to get out and about. And so with Brenda, I did do a lot of preparatory work in my own heart. And I wrote a lot, as you've experienced, writing
Yeah.
as a way of channeling your thoughts and creating structure where you didn't have structure before. And God knows I need to have structure in my life. And so I started in preparing for whatever the future had, having greater structure in my life. And most of that revolved around prayer, meditation, movement, exercise, eating well, um, creating music, writing. I did some noveling. I have a lot of fictional things that I've written that were just so much fun to do. So even I have a structure in my prayer life that started way back then, of what I call icons.
Yeah. Talk
And
about this, Dave. Let's
yeah,
kind of transition here to your prayer life a little bit.
yeah. So in Christendom, throughout history, elements within the body of Christ have had icons. They were images that they could focus on, that would be like a gateway into deeper intimacy with God. And so I love like ancient icons. I also love like more modern icons. And an example of a modern icon might be artwork that you really love.
Mm.
It could be movie clips, and we do this a lot in Zoe,
Yeah.
where we
Yeah.
use a lot of movie clips to
Yeah.
really, it's like, holy crap, that is so out of the scriptures. They're, Michael always says, they're stealing my stuff, or they're stealing stuff right out of the scriptures,
Yeah.
and I'm talking about Michael Thompson, who is the founder of Zoe. He and I are
Yep.
really, really good friends. So there's the modern icons of movie clips and music and
Yes.
poetry. So I have like ancient and modern icons, and having that kind of structure where, if I'm feeling like I'm feeling down about something or whatever, hey, maybe I need to go watch that clip where Rocky Balboa is talking to his son,
Right.
or watch that clip where William Wallace is on the horse going back and forth in front of his men. Men of Scotland. I mean,
Yeah.
I need to hear
Yeah.
those kinds of things.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like beauty to change us. And so I love to place myself in gardens and places of beauty, because it heals me. And so I'm a huge fan of gardens. I'm a huge fan of the Impressionists. I love Impressionist art, and I can sit in front of a painting until they close.
I can see that. Yes.
Right. And just place myself there. And especially like you look at some of Monet's paintings, he painted many landscapes, or he painted some landscapes many times. He did it at different times to capture what the light looked like, what things look like in the morning, and during the golden hours, and then during the day, and then as the sun started to go down. So it's just very cool to have something like that centers you and that brings you into the presence of God, that makes you really in touch with your humanity.
Let's touch on that a little bit, Dave. I think this is an important topic that you're touching on, because you're bringing up words like beauty. And again, we use this a lot in the Zoe world. And the reason for that is, and we were talking about this a little bit before the podcast, and I thought we might end up going down this road. That's why I stopped you. For me, and for a lot of people, I think we view prayer and worship in this corporate world where it's inside a church, and that's where it happens. And I think for a lot of people, that becomes their relationship with Christ. Maybe it's the only time that they have that time with Christ, in this corporate community in a church, and but there's far more to it. When we get into, you're talking about artwork, you're talking about music, Christ is in the middle of all of that. It's all beautiful. And it's important that we recognize that, and that worship or prayer it isn't done in a church setting. Church is all around us. Is that fair to say, Dave?
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. There's a place for corporate prayer.
Sure. 100%.
There's a place for formal prayer and formal liturgy and things like that. But the thing is that I am in church maybe a couple of hours a week.
Yeah.
And how many hours do we have in a week? Was it 168 hours? I forget what it is.
I know.
So yeah, I have that many hours -2 where I'm not in church. So to me, the way I define prayer, I define it as life shared with God. It includes talking with him. It includes listening, but it's really just about spending the day with God. And you and I have talked about this. I love to shoot the breeze with God.
Yeah.
To go on a run with God. When I'm down in my garage, I have my training studio, and I'm wailing away on my heavy bag. Jesus and I are doing that together. He's my corner man. He's my Mick, and he's calling the numbers, and I'm throwing stuff against the bag and wearing myself out, and he's having a great time. So I just love doing stuff with God. He wants to be a part of every aspect of my life.
Why is that
When I take-
important to recognize, Dave? Because I'm not sure everybody recognizes God in that way. And I feel
Yeah.
like, okay, well, you're missing. And when I say you're missing, I'm referring to myself too, because large portions of my life, I miss that intimacy. Like, hey, God, we're punching on the heavy bag right now, and we're having a real good time, Uh,
Yeah.
you know, you know where I'm going with it? Like, how can we help guys see that God is all around us? He's there when we're on that punching bag.
Yeah. Well, so Jesus to me is a master martial artist. He is a master storyteller. He is a master ecological engineer.
Oh,
He's a master writer. He's a master humorist. He taught Robin Williams how to be funny. That's where Robin Williams got it,
yeah.
right? And so I want to experience Jesus in all arenas of my life. I want us to have that kind of deep intimacy where we just share life, where he's participating in my life, he's partaking of me, and I'm participating in his. I'm partaking of his life. And to me, it makes life, even though it's very, very difficult and can be very saddening and heartbreaking and angering,
Yeah.
it brings an underlying peace and stability and joy to it. I am happy, Mike, pretty much all the time.
I can
I
vouch
lay
for
that. I lay that at thanks. I lay that at the feet of Jesus. He is the source of happiness. And when you really ask people ultimately what do they want after they get past, I want a good career, I want a comfortable place to live, and I want a great family. Really, when it gets down to it, I often do like this the so what test. You might be familiar with that. Somebody says, well, I want da 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 da, and I'm like, well, so what? Why do you want that? Well, because da 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 da. I say, oh, so what? Why do you want that? Once you really drill down, it ultimately comes down to, I want to be happy. I want these things because I think they'll make me happy. Thing
Yeah.
is that things don't necessarily make you happy. What makes you happy is knowing yourself just known thoroughly and loved through and through by God. No, I know. Here's how I know God. I know him as the eternal knowing one who knows me thoroughly. I love him as the loving one who loves me through and through. That is what brings deep happiness that can't be shaken. So even if I'm in the depths of suffering and sorrow, I'm happy at the same time. That is what we need from Jesus. That is what he provides ultimately. And
What about
he
what about
wants
that guy that's listening to this right now going, yeah, but the yeah butters, right?
Yeah. Each and every one of them has a story, and sometimes I just need to listen.
Yeah.
And that's what I enjoy doing, is coming alongside folks to discover more of who they are as someone known and loved by God. And Jesus understands everyone who says, yeah, but he knows that story inside and out. And I want to know it too. And then
Yeah.
maybe in listening to that one will get a sense that, well, you know what, usually when somebody says, yeah, but it's because there's something that they feel makes them unlovable, makes them feel like nobody really wants to know them. So how in heaven would God want to love me and know me? There's often so many things that are that have gotten in the way of them feeling loved by God. And so to the yeah but person, I'm like, let's just put ourselves in the presence of God.
Oh,
Let's go
yeah.
shoot some hoops for a bit. Let's have fun, and let's invite Jesus, because Jesus is the one that talked taught Dr. J how to sink, a sky. And I might be dating myself with
That's okay. We have not had a Dr. J.
J.
To the best of my knowledge, recollection, I don't think I've had a Dr. J reference on the podcast, but I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Or Michael Jordan. He taught Michael Jordan how to do that dunk that he does. That he's so
Oh,
famous.
man. There you go. We've
Right?
got Dr. J reference and Michael Jordan on the same podcast. Now we're talking. But it does bring up a really good point. I mean, there are blessings that God bestows on everybody that becomes part of our story. I mean, Michael Jordan is a lot of things. I'm sure he's a loving, husband, a loving father. I'm sure he's a believer, but Michael Jordan was blessed to entertain all of us.
Right.
Dr. J was blessed to entertain all of us. Robin Williams, he obviously had a lot of evil spirits surrounding him, but he was blessed to entertain all of us. And what an amazing thing that people get these skills. I mean, even you, Dave, I mean, the things that you do, like, I'm not a martial artist, I don't do that. That is a blessing that has been bestowed to you. And so there, we all have, and I guess where I'm going with that is because I see this a lot where guys, it gets into this whole worthiness factor. Like they don't feel worthy, like their story doesn't matter, but their story does matter. And I think that's what you and I, are trying to get out of them is that, there's a larger story out there, but you play a role in that larger story. Your story matters. You're worthy. And it's so important. And it hurts me when I see somebody that's going through that pain of feeling that unworthiness.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, me too. And so there are some things that we talk about in Zoe. It's like, what has eBay taught us about the worth of anything? Just kind of it's a little bit of a rhetorical question.
Yeah.
It's taught us that something is worth whatever people are willing to pay for. Right? So the creator of the universe thought you, Mike Van Pelt, were worth so much that he gave his own life.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he paid to win you back. That's how worthy you are, how worthwhile you are. And I would say that to anybody. That's something that I hear Jesus speaking into me all the time. Dave, you are so valuable to me, so very valuable to me. And I am so very interested in you in every part of your life.
Yeah.
And it's really neat to hear Jesus start to say those kinds of things to it. And so
more importantly, Dave, I think it's important to know, because that awareness that is available to you.
Yes.
It's not something that the pastor said over the top of you on Sunday or whatever. I mean, it's available.
Exactly.
Man, how life-giving is that?
Incredibly life-giving. That is life.
Yeah.
To know oneself loved to that degree. That is life-giving. It is the essence of life with God, life shared with God. That's the essence of prayer, is experiencing myself known that deeply, loved that much, and pursued that greatly.
I love that word.
Yeah.
Pursued.
Speaking of pursued, if you ask folks, what is their favorite psalm, they'll say probably Psalm 23. Most people will say Psalm 23 is their favorite psalm. I have spent so much time in that psalm. Psalm 23 verse 6 is the last verse in it. It says, "Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." If you look at that word "follow," here's what it really means. Surely, O God, you, loving kindness incarnate, will stalk me like a predator all the days of my life. So God, our loving God, is stalking me like a hungry predator, but he doesn't want to eat me. It's all beneficent,
Yeah.
right? But that is the nuanced interpretation of that word that is typically rendered follow. And I love when I read that, I love thinking of Aslan, this incredibly powerful kingly predator that could rip me to shreds in no time, wants only good things for me. He wants only good things. And he is constantly pursuing me like that.
That's so good. And is that where, I mean, people would know this. I know this because I know you, but is that where your prayer life is so, like, to me, Dave, you just like reach into a prayer and grab it by the horns. Like, I mean, you just really are, I can't even put the words to it, but you're so expressive, so adamant, so full of life when you're praying over people and in prayer. And it's so confident and real and authentic and authoritative. And as I've gotten around you, I'm like, well, that's what it's supposed to be.
Exactly.
Right. And so many of us, and I'm speaking about me, I sometimes pray passively, almost like I don't expect it to happen what I'm praying for.
Sure.
How do you come to that point where you are praying so authoritatively? If that's the right word, I don't know how you would describe it.
I actually love that word. What a great question. It really all stems from my relationship with Jesus. He is my big brother. I'm his baby brother. And I'm around him, and I'm around him all the time. And a lot of times, like, Jesus, I'm not necessarily looking for you to do something for me right now. I just want to be around you. I want to be around the things that you're doing.
Yeah.
And the thing is when you are around Jesus as your big brother, and Jesus is the consummate big brother. He epitomizes every good thing about a big brother. He's been around the corner. He's gone through a lot. He's developed a lot of skills. He's got a lot of wisdom, and he's got patience and time, and he loves hanging out with me, this fumbling little kid that keeps making messes and tripping and skinning his knee and falling off his bike, and falling out of a tree. Jesus is right there, and he shows me, Dave, this is how I do it. Let me show you how you can. And we take these little steps. And so he and I have been practicing prayer together for 4 or 5 decades. And so I'm becoming an older boy. I'm not the 4-year-old I once was. And the thing is that the closer I get to Jesus, the more I realize that Jesus's intent for me is to be just like him. And that word authority, and you were using that, is huge for me. I pray in the authority that Jesus has given me. It's the same authority that he had when he walked on planet Earth. It's no different. Now, granted, and we talk about this in Zoe, while I have the authority to hold a chainsaw, that doesn't necessarily mean I know how to use it yet. Right? While it is my chainsaw, I own it. If I'm a 5-year-old boy, I can hardly lift it off the ground, let alone start it and wield it, So my big brother has given me the chainsaw, and he's been teaching me for years how to use it. And now I'm sculpting ice with my chainsaw. And that is nothing but a result of moment by moment training of being with my big brother, watching how he does it, and then him coaching me in little ways all along. And so I'm wanting to just be more and more like Jesus. And I want to pray the way he does. I want to walk in the authority that he had because I have it. I want to do things out of the same intimacy he had with the Father because he desires me to have that.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of like what I would call like the power behind the badge of authority that I have, that you have, Mike. The authority in and of itself doesn't really do a whole lot, but it's the power. We have the weightiness of God Almighty, his kingdom, and the legacy of what Jesus showed us by coming to planet Earth and showing us what being a real human is, what being a man is, what being a woman is, what being a friend is, a true friend.
Yeah.
Who empties himself into those around him, is willing to go to the utmost extreme for someone else to benefit. So that's my big brother, bud. And I want to be like him.
I could just feel so much passion in that. And I love the analogy, maybe because I'm the big brother in my family, but, you know, and maybe that means I need to step it up as a big brother. I don't know. You know, I just love that. You know, one thing before we wrap up for sure, and I want you to just talk about the Revel life. In some respects, I think you just did, but
Sure.
but people may be going, okay, what is this Revel thing? What does that mean? Describe being a Revel on your own terms.
Sure. So the word revel, it means celebrate. To revel in something is to celebrate. And I want to live a celebratory life. I love being happy, as I talked about earlier, being joyous. So when I was thinking about like the Revellious, which is my podcast, I am combining rebel with rebellious because I've always sort of been rebellious in my life.
Yeah.
Not necessarily in a bad way, but more like I see what's going on. It's like, I think I'm going to go the opposite way. You know,
it might be a good thing in this day and age, actually.
Yeah, the older I get, and the more I see the culture around me, it's like whatever I see is being lauded out there and done, I'm going to do it the exact opposite.
Yep.
You know, so
For sure.
So for me to be a rebellious one is to be one who has devoted his life to pursuing deep and intimate relationship and intimacy with God, with my own self, with the people around me, and with the whole of creation. So it's about developing intimacy in what I call those 4 foundational relationships of life: relationship with God, with oneself, with the people around oneself, and with just the whole of creation, which includes nature, it includes the economy, the job world, the neighborhood you live in, you know. And so a rebellious one is one who's pursuing all that. And there are some characteristics that I've seen in my own life where I am a rebellious one is iconoclastically happy. And what I mean by that is through my own happiness, I'm tearing down the things that tend to rob people of their happiness. You know, and I tend to enjoy deep times of quiet and solitude. I don't own a cell phone. I like quiet. I like being able to come away from the world and to enjoy just being with my own thoughts. There are not a lot of people out there that enjoy being with their own thoughts. I do. That's a part of being rebellious, being living that revel life of shalom, where your life is integrated and you've got integratedness of belief, you've got congruency in how you approach life. Congruency is that's a huge value for me as a rebellious one. And really what I mean by that is I am living in a way that is, I pray, honoring to God, to myself, to the people around me, and to all creation. And so that's really what it means to be rebellious. And I can be serious at times. I can be very irreverent at times. And the thing is, I learned
I
that from
find that
Jesus.
hard to believe.
Yeah, well, I don't mean like I'm flippant toward God, but
Yeah.
I sort of like, I don't really like a lot of religious things that tend to get in the way of people really enjoying God and other people.
Yeah.
So a rebellious one sort of pulls those things down. A rebellious one also is not afraid to stand up for what is right. I have made a lot of people angry and upset through my take on things. And those who come listen to my podcast, I would imagine everybody is going to be offended at some point or another. And I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to offend anybody. I'm not afraid to hurt people's feelings.
Yeah.
As much as I care about people, like you, Mike, I care about you to death, but I'm not afraid to hurt your feelings. Not that I set out to do that, but sometimes, like in my own life, my feelings are going to be hurt at times.
Yeah.
But my aim is, if your feelings are hurt, it was in the interest of loving you and coming alongside you.
Right.
Helping to
Well, there is an honesty and authenticity and a truth to that.
yes,
That is not only important, but vitally needed in a world where people show up wearing a mask and posing quite a bit.
yes.
Now, some people would find that offensive that I just said that. And
Yep.
that's fine. Those are also the people that probably need to take a deep look in the mirror.
Of course. Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So I think, when we talk like this, I think you would agree that it's yeah. I'm the same way, Dave. I'm going to offend people at some of the things I say in my podcast. Not because I intend to. I absolutely don't. It comes from, if I say something, it comes from a truth, a belief, because it's said out of prayerful consideration.
Yes.
And so, I believe that God, helped me craft those words. And it's no different than, prior to every podcast, I have solitude and prayer that God will be, at the center of everything that I'm thinking and saying throughout that recording.
Mm-hmm.
And, but there's no two ways around it, Dave. When you're talking about the things that we're talking about, sometimes people's feelings are going to get hurt, and that's not intentional.
It's not.
At all. But that's also where we find ourselves, I do believe, a much more sensitive environment that we're living in these days. Much of it self-induced by people going with the herd versus like you and I probably do. Like, I'm going, you may go to the right, I'm going to the left. That's how that's going to work out.
Yeah. I think it was, isn't it C.S. Lewis was one of the first ones that said that if you are going against the herd as it's going off a cliff, you're going to be the one labeled as crazy.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And, if some folks label me as crazy, I'd say, well, okay, you're probably right.
Yeah.
To some degree,
I'd like there to be more rebellious people in the
Thanks,
world.
bud. Me too.
Yeah. I'm gonna vote for more rebellious, Dave. That we can agree on. So as we wrap up today, Dave, tell everybody how they can find you, how they can get a hold of you. We'll of course put all this information in the show notes, but how can they get a hold of you and even find your podcast?
Yeah. So I have a website, myrevellife.com. And you can go to that and you can access the Revellious Podcast there. There's a contact form there where you can reach out to me. I also have an email address, dave@myrevellife.com. And so I'm available. I love when people reach out, and I do Zoom meetings with folks, do phone calls, and then folks who live in this area. I live in the Raleigh-Durham area. So if folks are in this area, look me up, because I'd love to grab coffee or go hang out. We can go, beat the crap out of my bag if you want. So I'm semi-retired, and so I don't work a whole lot. I do a lot of things, but I don't work a whole lot. And so I try to make myself available to folks. And so look me up on myrevellife.com, send me an email, or reach out to me here in the Raleigh-Durham area. Of course, if you come on a Zoe retreat, come see me, because I'd love to chat with you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Come find Dave. This is so much fun. I could probably go on all day, but of course we can't have an all day podcast. That would just be too much for everybody. So we'll just kind of live with where we're at. But man, we talked about a lot of great things, and I so appreciate you, Dave. It's been wonderful to get to know you, and I enjoyed having you on the podcast here and spending a little bit more time with you.
Yeah, vice versa, Mike. I love you to death, brother. I love your podcast. And I wish you all the best. And I look forward to us being able to do more things together.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for coming on, Dave.
You got it, bud. You take care, okay?